Hello and welcome. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to build various data visualization charts using D3js API library. If you've reached here, that means you already know about D3js, so I won't go over it. But if you want to know more, there'll be a link in the description. Today, as our first data visualization chart, we're going to build a bar chart similar to this one. So let's just get started. A brand new JS Fiddle. You can use any other editor that you prefer. We will add a D3 library. Okay, yeah, it's done. So in terms of HTML, all we need is just an SVG with an ID or a name. So I'll use an ID called 1. And then in the JavaScript, we'll first define, so I'll just keep it really simple, given this is the first one. We'll define the size of the D3, the SVG. Then we'll define the data. Then we'll build the scale. We'll build X and Y scales. Then we will create and draw the axes. And then we will draw the data parts. Okay, really keep it really simple. So in terms of size, we're going to define height and width. You can do any type of sizes you like. SVGs are zoomable objects, but yeah, let's just go with 400 by 400 and margins on all sides. And then in terms of data, again, going to keep it really simple. Just going to say an array of objects. What this has is a month and a value of, just say 100. I'm just going to randomly create just 3 sets of values. You can add more. It's not going to change anything. So just your data might be different when you start building this in live. Okay, so very simple data. Now we build the scale. So by scale, what we mean is, sorry, I made a mistake with the data here. Just need to be colons. Okay, scales are we effectively defining how much space out of the height and width we're going to use to display the data visualization. So for y-axis, we're going to define a variable called y scale. It's a D3 has a scale functions. So for simple linear scales, we use scale linear. Then we define the domain. Now domain is the array of the values that you want between the, so from 0 to the max value you would want. So in this case, we define an array for 0. Again, D3 has a built-in function called D3 max to use that. And then we're going to use the values in here, these 3 values. We're going to take a maximum, which will end up with this value. But D3 max takes the parameters in an array. So what we're going to do is use a map function and get that mapped. Okay, and that should give us the domain between 0 and 160. And then the other function we need is the height. So height, So again, the Y scale works in the reverse point because you'll have 0 at the bottom and 160 at the top. So you'll have height, but we need to take out the bottom margin, top margins, and an extra bit of margin that we're going to need for the x-axis. So to do that, we do a height minus 3 times margin, and then the top bit is going to be the margin. We're not going to do 0 because we need some space at the top, especially if you have other things at the top, for example heading or something. And that should give you the Y scale. Between 0 and 160, between that lower bound and the higher bound, you will get a Y scale. Similarly, you'll define the X scale. Now we are going to use a slightly different function here. We're going to use scale band because this is a set of values we've got. We haven't got numerical values. So again, it takes in the similar sort of arguments here. We're going to use the all three data values. So simply pass the map function, and then we do a d dot month in there, and then you use the range, which will be, now this goes from here to here, so it's really the margin first, and then you're going to give width minus 2 times margin. Again, we left margin on this side and margin on that side. Again, it's just a good practice to leave margins, so if you have other elements on the page, they don't overlap. Okay, so that's how we've defined the scale. The next thing we do is we create and draw the axis. But before we can draw the axis, we need to get an SVG element created and pointing to the SVG element we created earlier in HTML. So to do that, we define a new variable. We just call it SVG. You can call it whatever you want. And then you say D3, and you get access to it by saying select. Because we've defined it as an ID, we have to use hash. If you just define it by name, you don't need to use hash. And then we will have the attribute width and height. So width is your width, and then attribute your height is your height. Yeah. And now we create the axes. So again, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to say y-axis D3, and you use a function called axis left because the y-axis is going to be on the left side. And we're going to pass an argument of the scale that we defined earlier, which is y scale. And we are going to append this to the SVG. But before we do that, we can't directly append it. We have to append an element called G. It's a tag called G, and then we call y-axis in that G. But we also need to make sure it's goes at the right place. So the way we do that is by calling transform, and then translate. And we're going to use the slash, and we do a translate, and then here we can do use margin values, and then 0. And by doing that, what we are effectively doing is we are calling the y-axis and transforming so it goes in on the left side here. If I save this, you see the y-axis appearing here with values from 0 to 160. I'm just going to change the font because I prefer slightly different font. I mean, obviously nothing is going to change, it's just a display. And then we do the same thing for x-axis. Now we've got y-axis. We're going to do sorry for that. Okay, axis. So D3, this time we're going to call axis bottom. It's going to go at the bottom, and we call the X scale that we defined earlier. And now again we do the same thing. We append a G. We use the transform. We use these translate, and here we're going to do it from 0, so it starts, nothing changes. It'll be here because it will go, we've already, when we defined X scale, we've made it to start from the margin, so it doesn't need any additional thing there. And then on the bottom though, we want it to start slightly above that the height, so we're going to do the calculation here for that, and that will be height minus 3 margin, 3 times margin. Okay, and then we use a function called call, and then use axis, and I may see a problem here with that one. Okay, if I save it, it's gone up there for some reason. I think I may have made a slight mistake somewhere. Translate. Yes, I forgot the bracket. So if I do that, yeah, it should appear correctly now. Okay. So that has now given us the the SVG, we've got y-axis, x-axis. Now all we need to do is draw the data bar. Now the way we do it is we again use our SVG variable, and then we need to do a select all for the rectangles, which are not, we haven't added them yet, but the only way we can attach data to it is by selecting these, attaching our data, and then creating them. So again, what we're going to do here is we're going to get all the values from here. So I'm going to do a d dot value map for that, so it returns a array. Then we call a function called enter, so it attaches itself to this rectangle object. Now we append the individual rectangles, so it essentially loops in and create these rectangles. Now this should start creating rectangles, but you can only do that if it knows where to start and where to finish. So to do that, we define its individual attributes. So we first need to define the start, the top part of that rectangle. So it's going to be an x1, and you get these parameters, the data value and the index. So you use that for each one to define the x variable and the x, the starting point of the rectangle. So you do that by margin, and you use the scale above, and then get the month, because we want the x is on the we have got these values on the x scale, so we're going to use x scale, and then use the index that we've got, data dot month. Okay, so that will give us an x attribute. Now we do the similar thing with y. This time we actually going to need, just going to use the make use of the d, and just use that to give us the top portion of the variables. You'll see of the rectangle. See once it start appearing. I'm going to use a width of the data bar of 25. So the fixed value we used, you can define the variable if you like, and then the height of the rectangle is going to be driven by the value. So again, we make use of y scale here, and the way we do that is we take that individual data element, we divide height minus 3 margin, 3 times the margin, minus y scale d. So if we really went here first and then we did a minus, so we end up here with that value. It still won't show it because we haven't added a fill value yet. So if I do that, it should give us the rectangles. So it's looped in and given us the 3 rectangles, and then you can check the values. Month of Jan, it's got 100. February, you've got 160. March, you've got 120. And this is all now dynamic. So as soon as you change the value, it goes up and down. And that's it. That's our first visualization right there. So this was a very simple one. I've also created a slightly more complicated one, use colors. Previously, I'm going to link this, give you a link to the code for this one as well. It's got a bit more data, used colors and so on. Again, I've not made it complicated, just kept it simple, much similar to the ones we've built earlier. Okay, hope you found this useful. I'll try and put more of these in the coming days. If you like to learn different D3 graphs and how to build them with me, just like and subscribe. Thank you.